But the first one I
That
popped
is
out,
true.
first one I found, probably because of the color, nice little crew scarf, to talk about the a lot of things actually recently. I mean, we're going to start, I think, with the Columbus Crew and their CCL. I mean, the only way I can put it is embarrassment, right? We're a little bit late to this party, but we should probably start with a game that could have set Columbus to be the best team in MLS history, bar none. They traveled down to Mexico to take on Pachuca, had a chance for the CCC title, and got absolutely washed. They looked tired. They looked slow. They couldn't beat the press. It was the exact opposite of what we expect a Crew team under Wilfred Nancy to look like. Was that because Pachuca was the better team? Maybe. Was it because nobody really was properly prepared to play at a stadium that's at elevation higher than Denver, Colorado? Maybe. But none of those are really exciting as it could be, where the totally believable accusation that a Mexican hotel staff tainted the water that this team was using to cook and clean and drink. And everybody got diarrhea and got sick the day before the game. Let's chat.
Hmm.
Tell me about
Hmm.
it. What are
They,
your
they well, they must have been doing this for the last like 15 years.
Tell me then
Yes.
about what you think is happening with the Columbus Crew. What you think? Tell me your thoughts about the result. Tell me your thoughts about um, their performance, because I know you watched all 90 minutes because that's just the type of sicko you are.
Yeah, I mean, they got outplayed. They absolutely got outplayed. It was 23 shots to 11. And Pachuca had less possession with the ball. So they just straight up got outplayed by the better team. And there's no excuse that you could throw around of elevation or food poisoning. Like this has been a consistent theme for the last like 15 to 20 years where we're just not at the Liga MX level for CONCACAF Champions League. And that could be a whole separate discussion in itself, whether there's any like if there's weight to any excuses that people throw around for why that is. Um, I think Leagues Cup is going to be a good showcase of whether or not there is this gap between League MX and MLS. But right now, I mean, based on what happened in CONCACAF Champions League, you can't. It's hard to argue against the fact that there is still that gap because MLS teams did not show up in this tournament, and the cherry on top of all of that was Columbus's performance in the final, which was a good summation of MLS's performance in the Champions League this year.
Yeah, I mean, listen, nobody wanted this result to happen except maybe FCC fans. But I think what was worse was how uncompetitive the game was, right? I was watching this happen and it was just like I was watching a different team from what I'm used to seeing, right? It is, they got picked apart by a 34-year-old Solomon Rondon who, listen, I mean, Everton are massive, but he was their worst signing like this decade. He was terrible. And each attack, they looked like they were always behind in transition. They were always going to get caught in really bad positions. And if VAR and Patrick Schulte didn't step up, it probably would have been worse. It was a really poor reflection on the league itself, right? Because, you know, not that it showed that like Liga MX is clear of MLS because Columbus took down Tigres the round before, right? But what hurt was that in the biggest game of the year, they fell so flat so quick, right? And we've seen it like there are other games in there. The New England got hosed, right? Like there are other games where we just looked really uncompetitive, and that's disappointing. That's a disappointing look. But what I do want to know is it all their fault? I want to talk about this food poisoning rumor. In the end of the game press conference, Nancy was sure to give credit to his opponents, the clear better team, which was not arguable, right, based off of what we were watching. But he also mentioned that his entire team and staff were dealing with stomach problems, diarrhea, and other health issues the night before the game. Do you think that there was some game manipulation happening here?
No, no, I don't think there was any of that going on. That just sounds like a bunch of excuse. I if we're gonna lose, I'd rather us just straight up lose, like what most likely happened here. I don't want there to be like throwing around excuses. Like I've seen Jurgen Klopp do that with Liverpool, and it always just makes it really. It just makes it look so much worse than it actually is. Where he's like, oh, they didn't cut the blades of grass evenly, so our players were tripping all over the blades of grass, and that's why we lost the game. It just sounds so stupid. Like, just accept the loss, move on. Like, I don't think the team suffered food poisoning, and that was the reason why a 34-year-old Solomon Rondon tore you apart.
To be fair, Jurgen Klopp is a fraud. So, I mean, whatever.
Coming
Um,
from the Everton fan, no bias
whoa,
there.
whoa, whoa, bias. What are you talking about? Listen, I genuinely, I don't think it's out of the question. Like CCC, it's not huge for us, right? Like we know that it's not a big deal, but for them, it's massive. It's a shot at the Club World Cup. They get to play against the biggest teams in the world, and they win it all the time. It's bragging rights. So, would they go as far as to ask the hotel serving staff that, maybe they use some bad water to cook their food? I wouldn't. I genuinely, I wouldn't be shocked. But here's my like kicker. It's the biggest game in the club's history. Are you not taking your own chefs with you? Are you not taking your own pre-made meals, bottled water, anything like that? Like, I'm not saying you have to expect it, but wouldn't this trip look like, wouldn't you expect to have more people there to rule out anything like this?
It doesn't fit in the salary cap.
Nice. Yeah, that's the one that kind of got me thinking about it. But um, at the end of the day, I'm sure any team going to Mexico for a game like this is probably not taking that chance again. They're going to get cooks there. They're going to bring meals and food and water and whatever. But it wouldn't shock me if this was like a real thing. Now, again, I'm not coming out and being like, "Oh, that's the reason we lost." Like they were bad, right? They looked poor. They weren't good in transition. They were beaten by the better team. But I mean, it doesn't shock me if that happened.
All right. Well, that's your opinion. Fair
Well,
enough.
people were really quick to fall onto this like problem, like the reason that we lost is because of the spending issue, right? Like they spend more than us because salary cap, blah 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 blah. Usually that's a and we've talked about this before in earlier rounds. Like usually that's a pretty decent reason to fall back on things, but not in this game. I wouldn't use that in this game. We've hit before the way we spend versus the how we spend, and that argument we've talked about plenty of times. But a report came out, and it was on Twitter, so accuracy, be what it is, that the crew spend about $16 million a year on their team, while Pachuca only spends 8, and none of which are on a yearly salary that would make them a designated player per salarysport.com. So, we've talked about it a lot regarding the way that we spend versus how much we spend, but there is genuine excitement for this rule change coming up and all this stuff. But I think in this instance, at least, spending wasn't the issue here, right? And we've covered it. Like Tigres Club America, they're spending way above us. That's fine, but it's not something you can always lean on. And this one is, to me, an example of that. It's just a matter that they're not showing up, plain and simple.
Yeah. No, I think that's your indicator right there that they just got beat. They just flat out got beat in the final. And it's not an argument of, oh, did they have the depth to do it? Are these guys tired? Like, it's the start of the season. So, I mean, you can maybe make the argument that they're just not at full fitness, but I don't think you can really make the argument that it's like, oh, they don't have the money to compete because there's big money signings in this Columbus team outside of just the depth conversation. You've Cucho Hernandez, that's big money signing. Diego Rossi, big money signing. And we talked about this team being super deep. I mean, it was one of our big points of discussion when we were talking about the playoffs last year and them making their run, is the fact that they always have the next man up. So I don't think you could necessarily make the argument that like money was the problem in this case. Maybe money is an issue for some of the other teams where they are going through maybe some injury problems and they don't have the depth to substitute the next guy up. But in this case, I don't think that was the reason. I mean, I think it came down to a one-off game and Columbus didn't show up in the one-off game. Like it's going to happen sometimes. I'm sure other teams probably also experienced it in this tournament. But I still stand by the fact that I think the salary cap is an issue and should be tweaked, but I don't think it was a problem in this particular game.
Yeah, yeah, agree completely. So, alrighty.